Okay. Getting to the next question we have here: the Earth, is it flat or globe? Is there a bunch of Orthodox amongst monastics who hold an Old Testament view of cosmology with hell under us and firmament above us, not outer space all around us? And that's kind of presupposing.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, it presupposes that the Old Testament that the only acceptable interpretation is a flat Earth interpretation. Yeah. Now, I will say this, and I will correct myself from something I said years and years ago, and obviously, we're always going to be wrong about things, and as we realize it. I don't think believing in a flat Earth is a heresy. I think the majority of the fathers did not hold it. All right. But
yeah, it's really more of the realm of science.
I think that the problem is that some of it is. I mean, do you mean, for example? I mean, if I'm mistaken, if it is a heresy to hold flat Earth, I mean,
I've never heard of a heresy.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I don't think it is. I just the problem I've encountered is you have like Saint Bede, for example. All right, Saint Bede says the Earth is an orb, and that it is the shape. It is like an apple or an orange or something like that. Okay.
That's pretty round.
Now, if you read obviously he did. Now there is some debate about whether St. John Chrysostom believed the Earth was flat or was round. It does seem there is some text where he gives various opinions, but he didn't seem to think it was a big deal. All right.
Well, yeah, and this is, I think, one thing we should bring up is that the modern origin of the flat Earth debate did not stem from within the Orthodox Church. It stemmed from outside of it. And it was a question that originally was not even a religious one, but it was a secular question in the 18th century that eventually made its way into Protestantism. That's one part of the reason.
Now, St. Isidore of Seville, by the way, there is debate about when you read his etymologies, and book 2 or 3, about whether he is describing a flat Earth. When they say flat Earth, by the way, they don't mean the Earth is a two-dimensional object. They mean it's sort of like a disc. A round disc,
a round disc that you can
circular
travel
disc
around.
Or something like that.
That the Antarctica is the edge of the firmament, as opposed to.
And the reason is that if you look at a lot of early medieval maps and some maps from late antiquity, okay, that we have recovered, because a lot of manuscripts that are like you can find a manuscript from like 600 that's written that was copied in a monastery, and they will be copying, let's say, a Latin geographical work composed in 50 BC, and they'll copy the illustrations also. That's why those are so useful. All right. And they will show the Earth looking like it's a circle, okay? And Jerusalem is like at the center. Well, maybe not, and at least the Christian ones. Well, sometimes the Latin ones do, but the pre-Christian ones too. And it'll look like the continents. It's almost looking like the Middle East or the Near East or the Eastern Mediterranean is the center of the world, okay, on the map, all right? And you have like the continents coming out from them, all right?
So it's like a neoconservative map of the Earth.
I suppose.
Sorry,
I suppose you could say that, but I don't think they have the same intention. I mean, but and so so you had there is some debate about whether Saint Isidore believed whether the Earth was an orb or was flat. There's this whole debate about the antipodes. Okay, how to interpret the description about the antipodes. Now, what are the antipodes? Antipodes are the other side of the Earth. Okay, for example, the ancient geographers. And this is before even the Church, the New Testament, Church in the New Testament was founded. Ancient and geographers believed in what was called the torrential zone. All right, that is, they were ancient geographers like Plato and Aristotle. I mean, I guess you call Aristotle a geographer. He did indulge in that. They did believe in a round Earth. Okay. And this is just a related subject to the whole flat Earth discussion, okay? And I have no problem discussing this because, to me, it's, I don't get upset about it. Why would I get upset about somebody who said, well, I believe, the Earth, why am I going to get angry at somebody for that? It'd be stupid to, all right? But, so ancient geographers who, the classical Greek view of the round Earth, now the Epicureans, by the way, and the atomists, they did not believe in a round Earth. All right, which goes against the modern atheist position where they try to want to make Epicurus and Democritus and Lucretius, the Latin atomists who believe in the flat Earth, they want to make them like these paragons of scientific investigation, where when they believe these things that are embarrassing from the perspective of modern atheists. So they would have said the ancient globular or spheroid Earth proponents, you might say, that there was a torrential zone. The torrential zone was basically what we call the equator, but a lot bigger than it, okay? Because they reasoned that, look, the further north you go, what happens? It gets colder, right? Okay? The further south you go, you know, it starts to get hot. You start to go into Egypt, it gets warm, really warm. You start to go into southern Egypt, it gets hotter. You start to go into Sudan and then Ethiopia, it's hot as well. So the Greek geographer said, well, this makes sense. This probably means it's going to get to be like 150 to like what we would think of like 150, like boiling water temperatures for several hundred miles. Therefore, nobody lives in the South Pole. All right, that was their conclusion. This became a continuously debated point because the authority of the classical Greek geographers was so strong, and it wasn't just Christians who believed that. People thought, you know, Aristotle and these Greek guys are geniuses, and they were very intelligent men. All right, and they were like universal savants, and whatever they said must more than likely be true. So people just said, well, the Greeks said it must be true. All right, I know that's simplifying it. So there was, in fact, a discussion about are people living on the antipodes. So I mean, there is some evidence that there were some Eastern Church figures like he was the friend of St. John Chrysostom. And then he later became the enemy of St. Chrysostom, but he never died outside the church. Suaidan of Gabala, I believe. And, in fact, some of his homilies were later attributed to St. Chrysostom because he had a very similar preaching style. Suaidan of Gabala has this series of homilies where he, like, mocks the round earth as being... I mean, for example, that he did say it doesn't make any sense, it's against the biblical record. His view was that the world is sort of kind of a flat disc, in the sense we're describing it, okay? And you have a dome, all right? And then you have underneath it, all right? And then maybe there's some sort of waters above and below the dome, okay? Right. I can't quite remember, all right? There were other church fathers who did not interpret it that way. Some of them did believe that references in the Old Testament had to be interpreted in the terms of perspective, if you know what I mean, okay? Right. So you're going to, if for example, if I say, I saw the sun setting over the hill, okay, and I'm living on, and then someone says, when did it happen? Well, I saw the sun set at 6:20 in the afternoon, and they say, well, that's not true. I saw it set at 6:25. Well, the reason being is we're at different elevations. I mean, there's different hills, there's geographies different. You know what I'm trying to say? Even if we're at the same like latitude and longitude and what have you, yeah. We can see the sun go underneath different objects at different time, and it may be dark at different times for us, or something like that. All right, so that's a matter of perspective. There were a lot of fathers who thought we have to that these are accurate descriptions in as far as they are describing the events that they saw. All right, so were there? I'm sure there were many Christians who thought, you know, like Suaidan of Gabala, that the earth was flat. Before people begin to attack Christians for that, I mean, Anonymous Jones may be like, well, the Suaidan's right. Okay, maybe that's his view. I should also point out that if you had gone to a 2nd century materialist atheist, essentially a material atheist almost, Lucretius, all right, I've seen all these materialists and atheists bring him up. He believed in a flat earth.
I want to clarify here, because I do want to clarify here because you have mentioned quite a number of fathers with different positions. Again, there is no official position of the church on whether the earth is flat or not. It is not something that has... No,
I will say this. I will say that there is a predominant opinion when you get to the medieval period among you might see more educated fathers of the round earth. All right, yeah. Because and you have,
but they never declared it was a heresy.
I don't think they ever. I think if some Bide said, "Well, I believe there was a flat." Well, I can't imagine Saint Bede saying you can't take communion now.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
That would not be how it. He'd try to. He might talk to you a little bit, and maybe he'd say, "Well, look, it's not really worth getting in that 10-hour discussion with this guy. Here's my reasons. If you don't accept them, okay, you know." You're still a monk of the monastery, and you're still a Christian.
Yeah, you wouldn't. You're not gonna,
there would be no reason to attack those people if we're believing that.
Yeah,
And so now the part of the rationale that I think against it, you could argue from a church perspective without going into the dogmatic field,
mm-hmm.
would be that when kings are consecrated and emperors are consecrated, they're handed a globe with a cross on top. All right. Have you ever seen those before, Father?
Yeah, the orb. Yeah.
Yes, and that represents Christ conquers
Ruling
the world. Exactly. Now, the argument I have seen against saying that is a reference to the round earth, what I have read, is the view that that's simply describing the mundus, or the cosmos. Mundus,
right.
by the way, is the Latin equivalent. We often translate as world, almost like we're talking about the earth itself, but it's actually the Latin equivalent of cosmos, or the universe. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's almost the view that that's really a description of the cosmos is almost like is represented as a sphere, and the cross is on top, and Christ is king of the universe, or something like that. There are some who say that's not quite accurate. That's really reference to the earth. But I mean, I have. There are some people who go too far, and they say no. All the church fathers believe the earth is round, and that's I don't think that's accurate.
I think
not even old secular pagan scholars would have said that. Maybe most of them would have said. I can probably also say I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably most of the church fathers we have just simply accepted the idea from the then scientific consensus of the day. You might say it wasn't science of the day; it was natural philosophy. They called it that the Earth is round. They just didn't, they just thought, okay, it'd be like today. If someone says, "Do you accept nuclear weapons as being real?" I'm like, yeah, I do.
Yeah, well, that's
someone
exactly,
says I don't believe in nuclear weapons. I'm not going to get in a big. I'm not. What?
And that is actually a point of contention right now, whether nuclear weapons are real. But
I mean, it's not. It's a contention on the internet, not a contention.
But there's a reason for it. I think we should address the deeper reason behind
There's doubt about everything.
It's a distrust in institutions in a global sense.
And who can blame them?
Yeah, exactly. When you start seeing massive amounts of lies,
this is why even though I accept the spherical Earth, I don't get upset when people say this stuff, because if why would I get? I mean, it's. Do you remember that case? I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you remember that case that happened 10 years? You can find the NPR article from like 10 years ago of a science teacher in Nebraska who was upset that her middle school science students were arguing with her that the Earth was flat, and she did not know how to argue against it, and she was being embarrassed in class, and so she had to tell them, "You got to be quiet," and they're like, "Why are you silencing us?" And that just made it worse. All right, well, and then they had to bring in somebody from the National Science Education Institute or whatever to argue with this student, and it was just like catastrophe. All right, it's just comical catastrophe.
I remember that.
That if you are a middle school science if you're a middle school science teacher, and you're what we know what was true, most of their understanding of science is simply authoritative expositions. All right, this is what we were taught in the books. This is what we believe. Maybe they went through some very brief way of proving it, and they didn't. That's what
that was it.
And they can't say. Now, if it was me, I would simply say, you know what I'd say? I'd say, look, you can argue about this. That's fine, but you got to pass the test, and I can't control it. Now, if I said that, I'd be fired. I remember that happened when I was growing up. There was a history teacher who said he didn't agree with a lot of things in the history book, but he said, "Look, you got to believe what's on you got to just answer the course." But you weren't supposed to say that because they wanted to have the facade of free investigation. But it was this ridiculous rigmarole. I'm sorry to cut you off there. Continue.
Well, yeah. Well, one of the things I will say this is that one of the most well-known flat earthers in recent memory was actually praised, I believe it was by a NASA scientist, because he was creating his own rocket to prove that the Earth was flat, and actually created a successful propulsion test, which took him something like
he died. Did he die in the rocket test or something?
He didn't die in he didn't die in the test. He died of a heart attack a week later. So it was, the point is, it's just interesting that even a question like that can produce sufficient scientific inquiry to learn and create new things. So I leave the question open. I personally believe in a round Earth. I don't. If someone says I don't, I mean, you go with what your eyes say.
It would be somewhat comical, and actually I would actually like the idea that they could discover the Earth was flat, because it would overturn so much of what these people running. I mean,
it would be chaos. It would be absolute chaos.
That's maybe I shouldn't phrase it like that.
Maybe. All right, so let me see here. Blind G Tech says found the article about the Jerusalem bishop. It's 5 years old.
Okay.
Sava the Saint said Metropolitan Valentine did that to Gregory of Petersburg. Yeah, the
Oh,
Indiaslavius arch heretic. I didn't
or
want to say his name. That's kind of who I was talking about. So
okay,
I'll just skip that stuff
okay.
there. And let me say, Sava says probably wouldn't suggest sending this stream to Seraphim. Don't know what we said that might have caused a problem, but in any case, yeah, I mean, as I said, these questions, if they're not directly related to the teaching of the church concerning salvation, they're probably going to be open questions.
Now remember there are issues. I mean, obviously theology impinges upon history.
Yeah.
Okay, so you cannot say, well, I believe in the resurrection as an abstract theological proposition, but not as an historical fact. That's nonsense. That's blasphemy. That's something like late 19th. That sounds like 19th and 20th century German Protestantism. Like,
well, this is why Darwinian evolution is so much more dangerous than, say, for example, the flat Earth or round Earth controversy, because quite frankly, it's a discussion of how human beings came into existence, and it attempts to give a quasi-religious solution that is not Christian.
It's a continuous attempt to remove God through any means. Good night. From the equation.
Yeah.
To remove divine intervention in history, to deny one's senses, to deny one's internal conscience, to deny everything, and to create a facade, a false worldview, and to impel it on people for decades and now over almost we're going to be going on 200 years. It's pretty soon of increasing Darwinian pressure. And to the point where I've encountered Christian people who call themselves professing Christians, I'm not going to doubt their sincerity, who they will get upset if you say you don't believe in Darwinian evolution, or you only believe the Earth is 7,500 years old, and they'll get just even more upset than some atheist relative, because they were drilled in. They had such an inferiority complex in school, where the teacher was attacking them or other students were, that they want to be more Darwinian than the Darwinist. You know what I mean? And it's sort of sad, almost like a Stockholm syndrome. All right, where they feel that Christianity, this generic Christianity, is being like maligned by people arguing the traditional biblical narrative. It's also like you find people always bring. I remember this from 20 years ago. And people bringing up the Russian biologist exile Theodosius Dobritsky.
Oh, wow, yeah, his alternate. Yeah. That's the one with the alternate creation of the Earth or something.
Yeah, and he basically was. I think he may have technically died as a member of the OC. I don't know. He was cremated. I don't know if they ever gave him a funeral, but he was always brought up to me as like, he's this biologist who's Orthodox. But then if you start reading like other stuff he wrote, he believed in like reincarnation and transmigration. I was like, this is some crazy Russian esotericist who just went to church occasionally, and they're claiming him as Orthodox. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he did go to an ACA parish, and they just didn't say anything to him, or he didn't say these things. I don't know. I don't know what the situation was, but he believed really crazy heretical things, and bringing him forward as, well, this is the great example. I mean, it doesn't do your case very good. All right, and then attacking people, and they can claim, well, we're attacking. No, I mean, there's the attack on people who don't believe in the Darwinian, essentially atheistic worldview, even if they don't not claiming to be atheists. That's a real attack. People can get fired from institutions for that. You can lose academic funding. You could be, let's say, a scientist who's simply inventing doing research in like solar panels or what have you, okay, or solar physics. And I think I remember a case about this years ago. And they published like excellent research, but the Science Journal, guess what? They discovered that he was like a Presbyterian who believed in 6-day creation. And you know what happened? They pulled all of his material and they won't publish it. Even though his discoveries, and he wrote them, he said, "Look, my discoveries have nothing to do with evolution," and like, we don't care. All right, it's at an absurd level, and of course, and frankly, there's a wide range of people to whom Darwinian evolution and billions of years is fundamental to their worldview. All right, so fundamental that it's a religious view to them. All right, even if they claim they have a religion.